As I stood at the sink, washing dishes, her words echoed in my mind. If you were obedient, life would be easier. She said it so casually, so confidently, as if she were imparting some profound wisdom. Her condescending smile never wavered as she folded the laundry with precise, practiced movements, each shirt, each sock placed exactly where she deemed it should be, just like everything else in our lives. I watched her, my hands submerged in soapy water, but I didn't respond immediately. After 5 years of marriage, I had learned that reacting too quickly only prolonged the inevitable argument. So I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, and focused on scrubbing the plate in my hands. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the offhand way she compared me to a disobedient child. Or maybe it was the weight of thousands of similar moments stacked on top of each other, pressing down on me until I could no longer ignore them. I'm your husband, not your son. The words left my mouth before I fully registered saying them, my voice steadier than I expected. She stopped folding, her hands freezing mid-motion. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Asterisk, excuse me? Asterisk. I turned to face her, my pulse quickening. Asterisk, you speak to me like I'm someone you need to train, not someone you love. Asterisk. She laughed, but the sound was sharp, dismissive. More of a scoff than anything else. Asterisk, don't be dramatic. I'm just trying to help you be a better person. Why are you always so sensitive? Asterisk. I turned back to the dishes, but my mind was racing. Every decision I made, every preference I had, was questioned. Every achievement I worked for was minimized. For years, I had been slowly disappearing, reshaped into someone who caused the least amount of conflict. She stepped closer, her voice softening as if explaining something obvious. Asterisk, my mother always said men need guidance. She managed my father perfectly until the day he died. They never fought because he understood his role. Asterisk, something inside me snapped, not in an explosive way, but like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long, finally fraying and breaking. The relief was immediate. I'm not your father. I whispered. Her posture stiffened. Asterisk, what was that? Asterisk. I met her gaze, finally seeing the woman in front of me clearly, without the justifications I had been making for years. Asterisk, I'm not your father, and you're turning into your mother. Asterisk, the rage that flickered across her face was like nothing I had ever seen before. Asterisk, how dare you? After everything I've done for you, I sacrificed my dreams to build this life. Asterisk, but her words no longer had the same grip on me. I had spent years believing that every argument, every disagreement, was my fault. That was the ungrateful one. But this wasn't a marriage. It was control, dressed up as concern. We need to talk about our relationship, I said, my voice calm, certain. Asterisk, this isn't healthy. Asterisk, there's nothing to discuss, she snapped, her anger morphing into cold dismissal. Asterisk, you're being ungrateful and childish. Asterisk, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen. That night, as I lay beside her sleeping form, I replayed the years of subtle control. The separate bank account she insisted on because it was more organized. The friendships that faded away because she found flaws in everyone. The career opportunity one had declined because she said it would destabilize our future. I had been so focused on avoiding conflict that I had allowed myself to become a passenger in my own life. But when she compared me to her father, it all became clear. I wasn't a partner to her. I was a project, a person to be shaped, directed, controlled. Dawn was breaking when I made my decision. If obedience was a key to an easier life, then I would make my life easier on my own terms, not by submitting, by leaving. The days after our kitchen confrontation were eerily normal. On the surface, we moved through the house like a well-rehearsed performance, but beneath it, everything had shifted. I started noticing things I had overlooked for years. She casually glanced at my phone as she passed by. Asterisk, just curious, who's texting you so late? Asterisk, she asked, her voice light, but her eyes sharp. My passwords weren't really mine. Couples shouldn't have secrets, she'd always said. Even my clothing choices were subjected to her approval. always framed as helpful suggestions. I decided to try once more. Over dinner, I spoke carefully. Asterisk. I feel like I've lost myself in this marriage. We need to find a balance where both our needs matter. Asterisk. She sighed dramatically, placing her fork down. Asterisk. Is this still about what I said? You're really dragging this out. Asterisk. I kept my voice steady. Asterisk, for us or for you? Asterisk. Her expression hardened. Asterisk. If you can't tell the difference, that's concerning. Everything I do is for our future. Someone has to think long term. Asterisk. The conversation unraveled from there, a familiar script. My shortcomings, her sacrifices, how her parents' marriage worked because her father understood compromise. By the end, somehow, I was the one apologizing. The next day, I scheduled a therapy appointment. I told no one. After explaining our dynamic, the therapist studied me carefully. What you're describing sounds like emotional control, she said. Asterisk. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect and autonomy. Asterisk. But she's not abusive, I protested weakly. Asterisk. She never yells or threatens me. Asterisk. Control doesn't always look like anger, she said gently. Asterisk sometimes is presented as love, as protection, as knowing what's best. Asterisk. I left her office with a reading list and a strange mix of validation and grief. In secret, I read books on emotional manipulation and codependency. Each page was like a mirror reflecting my marriage back at me. That weekend, while she visited her mother, I reviewed our finances, opening a private bank account and transferring small amounts. I researched apartments in a nearby city. Each step was both terrifying and exhilarating. When she returned, she brought her mother's scrutiny with her. Mom thinks you've been distant, she said. Asterisk. She says I need to pay more attention to your moods before they become a problem. Asterisk. I almost laughed. The triangulation was textbook. I prefer if you didn't discuss our marriage with your mother, I said. Her expression softened into feigned concern. Asterisk. We're just worried about you. Maybe you should talk to someone. You haven't been yourself lately. Asterisk. The irony of her suggestion, right after my secret therapy appointment, wasn't lost on me. But I knew now her concern wasn't for me. It was for maintaining control. Planning my exit took time. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank, siphoning small amounts from each paycheck. I scanned important documents when she was out. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Something shifted in me. I stood straighter, spoke more confidently. A co-worker even noticed. Asterisk. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. You seem more present. Asterisk. The irony? I was becoming more myself as I planned to leave. 3 weeks in, she noticed a change too. You've been distracted lately, she observed, eyes narrowing slightly. Asterisk. Is there something going on at work? Asterisk. I met her gaze, my heart steady. Asterisk. Just focus on a big project. Asterisk. And for the first time in years, I wasn't lying. Years of experience had taught me a harsh truth. Honesty in the wrong hands could be a weapon, twisted to manipulate rather than amend. I kept that lesson close as I forced a neutral expression, listening to her stir her coffee with meticulous precision. Well, I hope it's worth it, she said, her tone laced with casual disapproval. Your attitude at home has been disappointing. It was a familiar tactic. Framing concern as criticism, reasserting control under the guise of care. Maybe we should plan a weekend away, she continued, offering a practiced smile. Reconnecting might help. My mother offered us their lake house. The words were presented as a gift, a thoughtful gesture, but I knew better. It was an attempt to isolate me, to strip me of outside influence, where she could tighten her grip without interference. The realization didn't wound me the way it once might have. Instead, it confirmed that I was making the right choice. Let me check my schedule, I answered noncommittally, taking careful note of how her eyes narrowed at my lack of enthusiasm. That evening, I signed a 6-month lease on a modest apartment 20 minutes away. The property manager had a unit ready immediately, an unexpected stroke of luck that I hadn't dared to hope for. With trembling hands, I handed over the deposit from my secret savings account and received the keys. Standing alone in the empty apartment, I was overwhelmed by a dizzying mix of terror and exhilaration. The bare walls and uncurtained windows felt both starkly vulnerable and brimming with possibility. I had 2 days to furnish the space minimally before my planned departure, and every second of preparation felt like an act of quiet rebellion. When I returned home that night, she was waiting with a glass of wine, wearing that particular smile that once made my heart race, but now made my stomach clench. "I was thinking about what you said a while back," she began, voice dripping with practiced empathy. "About losing yourself." I stilled, watching her carefully. "Maybe you're right. We should work on that together." For a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. Was I overreacting? Could we fix this? "I even ordered that book your colleague recommended about marriage communication," she continued, gesturing to a package on the counter. My blood ran cold. I hadn't mentioned any book, which meant she had been checking my browsing history. Or worse, my emails. "That's thoughtful," I managed, taking a sip of the wine she had poured. The taste felt thick and heavy on my tongue. "I'm actually pretty tired tonight. Mind if we talk more tomorrow?" Her smile tightened, so subtly that most wouldn't notice. "Of course, whatever you need." That night, I lay awake, listening to the even rhythm of her breathing beside me, my mind cataloging what I would take and what I would leave behind. Possession suddenly seemed trivial in the face of reclaiming my own autonomy. The next morning, I called in sick to work and waited for her to leave for her yoga class. Then I moved through our home with quiet efficiency, packing 2 suitcases with only the essentials: clothes, toiletries, irreplaceable mementos. My grandfather's watch, which she always hated, made it into the bag. It felt almost mechanical, watching myself dismantle a life I had once thought was mine. I left a letter on the kitchen counter, carefully worded, explaining that this wasn't impulsive but the result of years of gradual control. I included the contact information from my lawyer, another quiet preparation she hadn't foreseen, and the name of a mediator I had researched. Driving away from our house that day, I finally understood what freedom truly meant. It wasn't selfishness, as she had always implied. It wasn't irresponsibility. It was a sacred right to author my own story, however imperfect it might be. That first night in my new apartment was suffocatingly quiet. I sat on a hastily purchased futon, surrounded by boxes, wondering if I had made a catastrophic mistake. Then my phone buzzed, first with confused texts, then with anger, then with tearful voicemails that twisted my insides with familiar guilt. Asterisk, please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. Asterisk, asterisk, how could you leave like this after everything we built? Asterisk, asterisk, if you come home now, we can pretend this never happened. Asterisk, asterisk, my mother was right about you all along. Asterisk, I turned off my phone and slept better than I had in years. The next day, the storm truly hit. She showed up at my workplace, causing such a scene in the lobby that security had to escort her out. She reached out to mutual friends, spinning a narrative where I was a villain, having a breakdown, possibly an affair, definitely in need of intervention. Some people believed her. Others, those who had seen glimpses of the reality behind closed doors, offered quiet support. It was painful but clarifying. When anger didn't work, she pivoted to concern. Asterisk, I'm worried about your mental health. Asterisk, when concern failed, she tried nostalgia. Asterisk, remember our first apartment? How happy we were. Asterisk, when that didn't move me, she enlisted mutual connections to pressure me. Through it all, I maintained my boundaries with firmness that surprised even me. My therapist called it finding my voice. But to me, it felt like remembering something I had long forgotten. 3 weeks after leaving, I returned to our house while she was at work to collect more belongings. Instead, I found her mother waiting for me. She's lost weight, you know, she said from the doorway, arms crossed, barely sleeping. Is that what you wanted? I paused, recognizing the manipulation tactic for what it was. I wanted a relationship where both people had agency. I replied calmly, that wasn't possible here. Relationships require sacrifice, she countered sharply. My husband understood that. I looked at her, the blueprint of what my wife was becoming, and felt an unexpected wave of compassion. I'm sorry he did, I said simply. Then I continued packing. The logistics of separation were messy but navigable. Finances, legal documents, untangling years of intertwined existence. Each step was another thread severed from my old life, another quiet victory. 60 days after leaving, the legal papers were filed. 90 days after, we sat across from each other in mediation. Her eyes bore into me with the same calculated vulnerability that once would have made me crumble. Instead, I remained attached, focused on fairness rather than reconciliation. You'll regret this, she said softly as we left the final session. No one will ever know you like I do. For the first time, that thought brought me comfort rather than fear. 1 year later, I barely recognized the man I was. My apartment was no longer a refuge. It was a home. Books lined the shelves, ones she would have dismissed as unnecessary. Art that spoke to me, rather than match the furniture. The silence that once felt suffocating now felt sacred. I'm glad you're doing well, I said, but I think we both know what happened between us. Revisiting it wouldn't serve either of us. Her smile tightened as she realized the old hooks no longer caught. You've changed, she observed, voice tinged with accusation. Yes, I agreed simply. That was the point. And as I walked home, I finally understood the ease she had once offered came at the cost of my identity. The difficulty I chose instead, the solitude, the uncertainty, the weight of full autonomy, had given me something far greater, the profound relief of living authentically.